Have you ever poured your entire soul into being the responsible one? The dependable one? The person your family could always count on to be steady, to be the anchor in any storm? I was that person. For 32 years, I was the rock. And then, in a single conversation, I learned that to my family, my rock-solid foundation wasn't something to be valued, it was something to be sold off to fund my brother's latest fantasy. They took my future, the one thing I had been promised, the one thing I had counted on, and they gave it away without a second thought. And when the consequences of their actions came knocking on their door, they expected me, the person they had just shattered, to fix it. They thought I would save them. They were wrong. And yes, because of the choice I made, my parents lost everything. They lost their home. So if you want to know how I made my parents homeless, stay with me, because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about what happens when the anchor finally decides to save itself. My name is Evelyn, but everyone calls me Evie. I'm a financial planner. It's not a glamorous job, but it suits me. I like numbers. I like order. I like having a plan and knowing, with a reasonable degree of certainty, what the future holds. My entire life has been built on that principle. Work hard, save diligently, be prepared. It's a stark contrast to my older brother, Leo. Leo doesn't like plans, he likes dreams. Big, flashy, technicolor dreams that always seem to promise unimaginable wealth right around the corner. Growing up, our house was like two different worlds living under one roof. My world was homework, a part-time job, and saving for a down payment on a car. Leo's world was a revolving door of once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. There was the time he invested a few $1,000s borrowed from my parents, of course, in a line of gourmet, self-heating coffee mugs that, it turned out, had a tendency to just melt. Then there was the alpaca farm phase. Don't ask. He was convinced he was going to corner the market on luxury yarn. That ended with 3 very confused alpacas in my parents' backyard and another loan from them to cover the damages and send the animals to a proper sanctuary. Each time a dream would collapse, my parents would sigh, shake their heads, and then write another check. He just has so much passion, Evie, my mom would say. You can't fault him for trying. My dad would chime in, he just needs one big break. This next one could be it. Me. I never asked for anything. I got a scholarship for college. I worked 2 jobs to pay for my apartment. When my car broke down, I took the bus for 6 months until I had saved enough to fix it myself. My parents saw this not as a sign of my independence, but as proof that I was fine. I was steady Evie. The one they never had to worry about. Their love for me felt like a comfortable old chair, taken for granted, while their love for Leo was a frantic, high-stakes game. They were constantly playing, always betting on him to finally win. I didn't resent it, not really. It was just the way things were. My anchor in all this, my true north, was my grandmother. My dad's mom. She was like me. Practical, no nonsense, with a sharp mind and a heart of gold. She saw the dynamic in our family with crystal clarity. She adored Leo's charm, but she never once fell for his schemes. She saw me. She saw me studying late at night. She saw me meticulously balancing my budget. She saw me quietly fixing the leaky faucet at my parents' house that they'd been ignoring for months. Her home was my sanctuary. A beautiful, modest, 2-story house on a quiet, tree-lined street. It was the house my dad grew up in. It wasn't a mansion, but it was filled with memories, and it was paid off. It was solid. It was real. When she got sick, I was the one who managed her appointments, her medications, her finances. Leo would visit, bringing flowers and telling her grand stories about his latest venture, which always made her chuckle. That boy could sell sand in the desert, she'd whisper to me. After he left, squeezing my hand. But you, Evie, you're the one who knows the value of Water. A week before she passed away, she called me to her bedside. She made me promise that I would always look after myself first. You have a tendency to carry the weight of everyone else, she told me, her voice thin but firm. Don't let them mistake your strength for an infinite resource. She told me then that she was leaving the house to me in her will. Not to my parents. Not to Leo. To me. Your parents have their home, she said. Leo will have 100 fortunes. Come and go. You need a foundation, my girl. A place that is yours. Don't ever let it go. I cried and promised her I wouldn't. The house wasn't just property, it was a promise. It was my grandmother's belief in me made tangible. It was my future. My foundation. My parents were the executors of her will. It all seemed straightforward. I grieved, but I found comfort in my grandmother's final gift. I started dreaming about the house. I'd paint the shutters, plant a garden, maybe even set up a small office for myself in the spare bedroom. For the first time, I felt like I had a piece of the world that was truly mine. A year passed. The probate process was slow, my parents said. I was patient. I trusted them. After all, they were my parents. The idea that they would do anything other than honor my grandmother's last wish wasn't even a possibility in my mind. Oh, how naive I was. The trust one had placed in them wasn't a bond, it was a blindfold. And it was about to be ripped away in the most brutal way imaginable. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was my mom, her voice unnaturally bright. Evie. Sweetie. Do you and your father have a minute to talk tonight? We have the most wonderful news. I smiled, assuming it was finally about the house. Maybe the probate was complete. Of course, Mom. I can be there by 7. All day, I felt a flutter of excitement. I imagined them handing me the keys, the deed in my name, a celebration of my grandmother's legacy and my new beginning. I walked into their house that evening carrying a bottle of champagne. They were both sitting on the couch, beaming. Leo was there too, standing by the fireplace, practically vibrating with energy. My stomach gave a little lurch. Leo's presence usually meant a new scheme was afoot. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Evie, my dad started, his smile wide. We've done it. We've finally secured the family's future. All of our futures. Leo stepped forward. Evie, you are looking at the future of sustainable luxury real estate development. I've acquired a massive plot of land just outside the city. We're talking eco-friendly condos, a community farm, the works. This isn't just a project, it's a legacy. I looked from my brother's manic grin to my parents' proud faces, and the cold knot in my stomach tightened. Okay, I said slowly. And, how did you afford the land, Leo? The last I heard, you were still paying off the debt from the alpaca venture. My mom clapped her hands together. Well, that's the wonderful news. Your grandmother, bless her heart, she provided the seed money. The world tilted. The air in the room felt thin. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, a slow, heavy drumbeat of dread. Grandma's money? I whispered. What are you talking about? My dad leaned forward, his expression earnest. The house, Evie. We sold Grandma's house. We got an incredible offer on it, far more than we expected. The market is just so hot right now. It was the perfect opportunity. I just stared at him. The bottle of champagne in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed £1,000. I set it down on the coffee table with a thud. You sold it. You sold my house. My mom's smile faltered a little. Well, yes, sweetie. But think of it as an investment. Leo's projections are incredible. Once the first phase of condos sells, we'll have more than enough money to buy you any house you want. A bigger one. A brand new one. This is better, don't you see? I couldn't breathe. It felt like the floor had opened up beneath me. I looked at Leo, who was avoiding my gaze now, suddenly fascinated by a spot on the mantelpiece. I looked at my parents, their faces glowing with a delusional optimism. They didn't see what they had done. They hadn't just sold a piece of property. They had taken my foundation, my security, the physical manifestation of my grandmother's love and faith in me, and they had handed it over to the family jester for his latest trip to the circus. The will, I finally managed to say, my voice a strangled rasp. Grandma's will. She left the house to me. To me. Not to you to sell. Not to Leo to gamble with. My dad had the audacity to look paternal, to try and placate me. Evie, wills are complicated. As executors, we had a responsibility to do what was best for the entire family. And we believe this. Is it? It's a short-term sacrifice for a massive long-term gain. You just have to trust us. Trust your brother. Trust them. The words were a bitter poison on my tongue. The people I was supposed to trust. Most in the world had just committed the ultimate betrayal. They hadn't just taken my inheritance. They had taken my identity as the steady one, the responsible one, and told me that it was worthless. They had told me that my security was less important than my brother's fantasy. I looked at their smiling, expectant faces, and all the years of quiet resentment, of being overlooked, of being the dependable, invisible daughter, came crashing down on me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not yet. A strange, icy calm washed over me. I stood up. I have to go, I said, my voice eerily flat. But Evie, honey, we were going to celebrate, my mom said, confused. I looked at her, at my father, at my brother. There is nothing to celebrate, I said. And I walked out the door, leaving them with their wonderful news and their bottle of champagne. I made it to my car before the first sob escaped. I sat there in the dark, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, and I cried until I had nothing left. I cried for the house. I cried for my grandmother's memory. But mostly, I cried for the little girl inside me who had just learned that her family's love was conditional, and her role was to be the sacrifice. That night, something inside me broke. But as the sun rose the next morning, I realized something else had been forged in its place. Something cold, hard, and unbreakable. If they wanted me to stop being the family anchor, then fine. I would. I'd let go of the rope. And I would let them see just how fast their ship could sink. Without me. The first few days were a blur of numb disbelief and white-hot anger. Every time my phone rang and I saw my mother's name, I'd feel a jolt of rage so intense it scared me. They left voicemails. Dozens of them. First cheerful, then confused, then hurt. Evie, why aren't you calling us back? Did we upset you, honey? We were only trying to do what's best. Your brother is worried. About you. That last one almost made me laugh. Leo wasn't worried about me, he was worried. The bank was having second thoughts. My first instinct was to fight. To hire a lawyer, to contest the sale, to drag them all through a nasty, public court battle for defying a will. I spent a whole weekend researching probate law, printing out articles on executor misconduct. I wanted to punish them. I wanted to make them feel a fraction of the pain and betrayal I was feeling. I pictured myself on a witness stand, telling the world what they did. But then, my grandmother's last words came back to me, as clear as if she were sitting right there with me. Don't let them mistake your strength for an infinite resource. A messy lawsuit would drain me. It would drain my savings, my energy, my very soul. It would take years. And what would be the result? Maybe I'd get some money back. Maybe I wouldn't. The house was already sold to an innocent third party. I couldn't get it back. All I would get was more pain, more fighting, and a family completely and irrevocably shattered. A war of emotion was what they expected. It's how Leo operated. It's what they understood. So I decided not to play their game. I would play mine. The calm, Methodical game of numbers, facts, and consequences. I am a financial planner, after all. My job is to assess risk and plan for the future based on cold, hard data. So, that's what I did. I took all the emotion, all the rage, all the grief, and I locked it away in a little box in my heart. Then, I sat down and made a plan. Not a plan for revenge. A plan for my own survival. I took a full inventory of my own finances. My savings, my retirement accounts, my investments. Everything I had built on my own, piece by piece. This was my lifeboat. They had taken my future home, but they would not take this. I immediately moved my money to a different bank, set up new accounts, and fortified what I called my financial fortress. It felt cold and clinical. But it was the first time in days I felt a sliver of control. Then, out of a morbid curiosity, I started looking into Leo's legacy project. It wasn't hard. He'd been bragging about it all over his social media. Leo Carter Developments, he called it. I spent a few $100s to run a business credit check and pull the public records on the land purchase. What I found made my blood run cold, but it also lit a tiny, dark spark of understanding. Leo hadn't just used the money from my grandmother's house. The sale price, while high, wasn't enough to cover the entire land purchase and the initial permits. According to the documents, Leo Carter Developments had also taken out a massive bridge loan from a private lender. A high-interest, short-term loan meant to be paid back in 90 days. But the most important part, the detail that made me sit straight up in my chair, was the collateral for that loan. It wasn't the newly acquired land. The private lender was too smart for that. The collateral, signed and sealed, was my parents' home. Their beautiful, fully paid off house that they had lived in for 40 years. Suddenly, it all made a horrifying kind of sense. My parents hadn't just been naive, they had been reckless beyond belief. They must have signed the loan documents with Leo, so sure that the sale of my house would cover everything, or that his condo project would be an instant success. They had gambled everything. They gambled my inheritance, and they gambled their own home, all on Leo. I didn't do anything with the information. I just filed it away. It was a ticking time bomb, but it wasn't my bomb to defuse. They had built it, they had set the timer, and they were all standing right next to it, smiling. About 60 days later, the frantic calls started again. This time, it was Leo. Evie, I need to talk to you. It's an emergency. I let him go to voicemail. He called again. And again. Finally, I picked up. What do you want, Leo? I asked, my voice devoid of any warmth. He was talking a mile a minute. The permits are delayed, some environmental impact study. The investors are getting cold feet. I just need a little more capital to smooth things over. Just a short-term loan, Evie. I know you're good with money. You've always been so good at saving. My savings are for my future, Leo, I said calmly. Something I'm having to rebuild from scratch. But this is for the family's future, he insisted. You're being selfish. I laughed. A real, actual laugh. It was so absurd, so utterly tone-deaf. Goodbye, Leo, I said. And I hung up. The final call, the one I had been waiting for, came on a Friday. It was my father. His voice wasn't proud or paternal. It was thin and reedy and terrified. Evie, we need you to come over. We're in trouble. I went. I walked into the same living room where they had shattered my world 3 months earlier. The celebratory mood was gone. It was replaced by a thick, suffocating blanket of panic. My mom was on the couch, openly weeping. Leo was pacing back and forth, wringing his hands. My dad was sitting at the dining room table, his head in his hands, staring at an official-looking letter. It was a notice of default. The 90 days were up. The lender was calling. In the loan. They had 10 days to pay in full, or the bank would begin foreclosure proceedings on their home. They all looked up at me as I entered, their eyes filled with a desperate hope. They still saw me as steady Evie. The emergency contact. The fixer. Evie, thank God, my dad said, standing up. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Leo's project, it's fallen through. The money's, it's gone. All of it. Grandma's money, I stated, not as a question. He flinched. Yes. And the loan. They're going to take the house, Evie. Our home. My mom looked at me, her face a mess of tears and desperation. You can help us, sweetie. Your savings. You've always been so responsible. We can pay you back, I swear. Once Leo gets back on his feet. I let the silence hang in the air. I looked at the three of them, the architects of my heartbreak, now begging me to save them from the consequences of their own choices. The emotional, angry part of me wanted to scream at them, to list every sin, every betrayal. But I didn't. I just walked over to the dining room table and looked at the notice. I can't, I said, my voice quiet but firm. What do you mean you can't? Leo sputtered. Of course you can. You have to. I finally turned to face them, my expression calm. I was no longer the heartbroken daughter. I was a financial planner assessing a catastrophic situation. I mean, I cannot help you. You sold my inheritance, the financial foundation my grandmother left for me, for 100-to-1 shot. On a bad investment. The money I have left is my entire future. It's my retirement. It's my security. It is everything you took from me and more. I will not set myself on fire to keep you warm. Especially not after you're the ones who stole my blanket. But we're your family, my mom sobbed. And I was yours, I replied, the first flicker of real emotion showing in my voice. But you treated me like a resource. You treated my future like a commodity to be sold. This isn't my mess to clean up. This is the bill for your choices finally coming due. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet, inescapable truth of my words was more powerful than any shouting match. They stared at me, their hopeful faces crumbling into sheer, unadulterated horror as they realized what I was saying. I wasn't going to save them. Steady. Evie was off duty. Permanently. I turned and walked out of that house for the last time. It wasn't a triumphant exit. There was no joy in it. My heart ached. But underneath the ache was a hard, solid sense of rightness. This wasn't revenge. This was a boundary. This was the moment the anchor decided to let the ship go, not to watch it sink, but to finally stop itself from being dragged under. The weeks that followed the foreclosure were brutal. I heard through the family grapevine a concerned aunt who was the only one who seemed to understand my position that it was just as bad as you'd imagine. There were frantic attempts to secure other loans, all denied. They had no assets left. Leo, for the first time in his life, had no one to bail him out. The for sale sign went up in their front yard, placed there not by choice, but by the bank. My phone was a minefield of guilt trips from my parents. How could you let this happen? This is your fault. Your grandmother would be so ashamed of you. For a while, those words cut deep. I started to second-guess myself. Was I being cruel? Was I a monster? I spent long nights staring at my ceiling, wrestling with the guilt they were so expertly trying to heap upon me. But then I would remember the look on their faces when they told me they had sold my house. The cheerful, dismissive way they had brushed aside my future. They weren't ashamed of their actions, they were just angry at the consequences. They weren't sorry for what they did, they were sorry they got caught. And that realization was like a shield. It protected the quiet resolve I was trying so hard to build. I made a key decision then. I blocked their numbers. Not forever, but for a while. I needed silence. I needed to heal without the constant barrage of blame. It was an act of Self-preservation that felt both liberating and terrifying. The day they moved out of their house, I stayed home. My aunt told me they had found a small, 2-bedroom apartment to rent across town. Leo, she said, had moved in with them. At 35 years old, the great developer was living in a spare room, sleeping on a fold-out couch. The 3 of them, who had gambled a legacy and 2 homes, were now crammed into a space smaller than the first floor of the house they'd just lost. There was a grim justice to it, but it brought me no pleasure. This was my turning point. With my family drama silenced, I had so much space. Space in my head, space in my heart, space in my schedule. All the energy I had once spent worrying about them, managing their chaos, and propping them up was now my own. And I decided to invest it in the one person I had neglected for so long, myself. I took the money I had saved, the lifeboat I had so fiercely protected, and I poured it into my own dream. Not a flashy, get-rich-quick scheme, but a solid, well-thought-out business plan. I left the firm where I was working and started my own financial advisory practice, Foundation Financial. The name was deliberate. My tagline was building your future on a bedrock of security. My first clients were small, mostly friends of friends. But my approach was different. I didn't just talk about stocks and bonds. I talked about life. I used my own story, anonymized, of course, as a case study. I spoke about the dangers of financial entanglements with family, about the importance of setting boundaries, and about creating a future that no one could take away from you. People responded to it. They saw the authenticity, the hard-won wisdom. My business began to grow, slowly at first, then all at once. Within 2 years, I had a waiting list. I had to hire 2 other planners to work for me. I was successful, more successful than I had ever imagined. The lesson I learned was profound. I had always thought my strength was in my ability to support others. But I learned that true strength lies in the ability to support yourself first. You cannot be an anchor if you are not tethered to your own solid ground. Enabling my brother hadn't helped him. It had crippled him, preventing him from ever learning how to stand on his own. My refusal to save my parents from their mistake was, in a strange way, the most loving thing I could have done. It forced them, for the first time, to face the reality of their choices. My new life is quiet, but it's mine. I eventually bought a small house, one that I chose, with a garden that I planted myself. It's my foundation, built not on a promise from someone else, but with my own 2 hands. About 6 months ago, my dad called me from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but I did. His voice was different. The blame was gone. The entitlement was gone. He sounded old. He just wanted to know how I was doing. We talked for 10 minutes. It was stilted and awkward, but it was a start. He told me Leo had finally gotten a real job, working in sales, and was contributing to the rent. He said my mom was taking a community college course on personal finance. "We should have listened to you, Evie," he said, right before he hung up. "You were always the smart one. I don't know if our family will ever be what it once was. The trust, once shattered, can never be perfectly whole again. There are still scars. But we are building something new, something more honest." My refusal to be the sacrifice didn't ultimately make me homeless, it forced us all to find new homes, both literally and figuratively. They found a home in reality. And I finally found a home in myself. And that is a foundation that no one can ever sell.